You have on today's assignment, page 5.7b, that covers the Pythagorean theorem, talks about the aspect ratio of a TV screen. If you think about our widescreen TVs now, you can actually switch the view of your TVs to theater view, widescreen, full screen. A normal aspect ratio is called a 4:3 ratio. Whatever the actual length and width are, the height and the width, is in a 4:3 ratio. So, for instance, if we were talking 4:3, 4 inches, 3 inches, your diagonal, because it's a rectangle, would be 5 inches, hence our Pythagorean triple. If it is in ratio, meaning a 4:3 ratio, I could do the same thing, but instead make this just a little bit bigger, and it could be 8:6, or I should probably say 6:8, because we would probably see the longer across the top, shorter down. Instead of 3:4, 6:8, maybe our TV screen 9:12, then adjusting the diagonal. And anybody who has purchased a TV knows that when they measure the size of the TV, they measure it across the diagonal. So what we're talking about in this question is the fact that we want this ratio to hold, that 4:3, the width to the height. So when we look at this question, it says that a normal TV aspect ratio is 4:3. Find the height and width if we know that it's a 32-inch screen. Well, if our screen looks like this, a 32-inch would go across the diagonal. So what I need to figure out is what is the height and the width. It's giving us 4:3, so 3x and 4x will allow us to figure out what's that common factor that increased it. Now, here it was really nice. 3:4, 6:8, 9:12. It worked really nice with whole numbers. It won't necessarily do that here because I'm hoping we can all see that 32 isn't a perfect square. So whatever these numbers are, it is going to have to be to the nearest tenth. I'd like for us to also try to put them in simplest radical form. So it is still a rectangle, so you will still perform the Pythagorean theorem. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Leg squared plus leg squared equals hypotenuse squared. 3x squared plus 4x squared equals 32 squared. 9x squared, because remember you have to square both parts that are multiplied together in here, plus 16x squared equals 32 squared, which is 1024. 9 plus 16 gives us 25x squared equals 1024. Now, here you can see that there's no way 25 is going to go into 1024 evenly. So if you did divide, you end up with x squared equals 40.96. We're using the decimal right now. Square root of both sides, and we end up with x as approximately 6.4. So what that tells me is if I plug 6.4 back in, 3 times 6.4 and 4 times 6.4, I'm going to know what the actual length, height, and width are here. So times 3 gives me a height of 19.2 and a width of 25.6. And these are the two values that we would want to know, find the height and the width. So set it up, 3x, 4x, there's your diagonal Pythagorean theorem. Plug your rounded to the nearest tenth back in, here's your height and your width. Now, Had this worked out to be a whole number when we did the division, you would be able to take the square root using the simplest radical form. This is a decimal. There is no way to simplify once a decimal is involved, so this is your only option. If it was a whole number, I expect you to provide me with the simplest radical form as well. Now, the second part of the question says a widescreen TV has a different aspect ratio. Think about it. It's much longer than it is tall. Find the length of the diagonal on a widescreen TV that has the same height above. So we're going to draw our picture. And we know that this is a 16:9 ratio. But again, we have our x that's going to be involved, and we want to figure out what this guy is. So we want to figure out what C is. So the widescreen TV has an aspect ratio of 16:9. Find the length of the diagonal on the widescreen TV that has the same height as the screen above. So our height here, if the height here is the same as this, 19.2, and they're telling us this is 9x, we can solve for x to know what to plug in here. So before we do the Pythagorean theorem, again, solve for x. 9x equals 19.2. When I divide both sides by 9, we end up with 2.13. So I'm going to plug in 2.13 here. And 16 times 2.13 gives us 34.08. So now I know that my height is 19.2, the width is 34.08. I have enough now to do the Pythagorean theorem to find C. So again, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. 19.2 squared plus 34.08 squared equals c squared. You have no choice. You have to use your calculator here. Squaring this number is 1161.45. 19.2 squared is 368.64. Add them together, and we end up with 1530.09, square root of both sides. And it tells us that our approximate diagonal is about 39.12.